We're going to open our council meeting, our last meeting for this council, and I'd like to advise everyone again that we are videoing and broadcasting this on YouTube, and it is if you could just wait until I announce you so that people can understand who's speaking. Before you do, we have apologies from Alderman Sexton, which is a shame because we won't be able to bid our farewells to him. He's not standing here. And we also have one more council meeting. Oh, is there?
Yeah. There's a special.
Tuesday night meeting, I think. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, no worries. So we have an apology from Alderman Zuko and an apology from Alderman Sexton, and otherwise everyone else is here. And in recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which the city of Hobart was built, and pay my respects to the Palawa people of Tasmania who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and rights. The minutes of our last meeting, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Barakis. That's the 26th of September. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Are there any items to be transferred? There being none, we'll move on. No communications from me, no council workshops. I don't think we've got any public questions, but we do have some responses that if someone would move those. Moved by Alderman Baraka, seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Are there any petitions? CEO?
Lord Mayor, I understand there is a petition, but we're just finding the paperwork now. Apologies for that. So we might come back to that item with your forbearance. Thank you.
Supplementary items, we have none. Item 8 is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Are there any elected members wish to indicate an interest in any item on the council agenda? There being none, I'll move on to the City Planning Committee and note that we are now acting as a planning authority. Invite Deputy Lord Mayor to move item 9.1.
Yes, I'll move that item, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Lord Mayor, this is a consideration under the Sutherlands Cove planning scheme, and it's a council initiated application really, but it's really to transform the so-called waterfront into actually a waterfront by having 14 water supply facilities across both council and Tasport's land. So there would that's stretching from 3 Argyle Street, 30 Morrison Street, 18 Hunter Street and Franklin Wharf, Salamanca Place and Kennedy Lane. Lord Mayor, specifically would be the installation of 15 water supply facilities, that's water bubblers and water and bottled refills in various locations, and 3 units would be 3 unit sizes are proposed, with 2 wall-mounted units, 3 1,500 millimetre high units, and then 10 900 millimetre high units with signage affixed to all units to include artwork and details about this water initiative. So it relies on the performance criteria of activity area controls, public urban space and signs. It's also been looked at by the heritage officers, and on balance it is a suitable application, and it meets all the performance criteria as it should. So really a significant initiative to effectively, what it's trying to do is to try and reduce the use of plastic water bottles, and we know full well that across the city there have been many bubblers rolled out, and this is this is a more comprehensive approach to this along the Hobart's waterfront.
Further discussion? No. Oh, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Look, I'm really pleased with this initiative. Encouraging people to drink tap water, I think, is really important, especially when you've got some of the best tap water in the country. But a lot of the time, people don't realise how good the tap water is in Hobart. But by encouraging people to refill their own bottles, firstly, they'll learn that we do have quality water and you can drink from the tap. And secondly, I think that this will reduce single-use water bottles by many tens of thousands of bottles every year. It might only be 15 bubblers across the waterfront, but there are other bubblers as well that this will complement. But encouraging people to drink the water has the benefit of promoting our good quality water, but also in reducing single-use plastic water bottles, which often don't get recycled because they go into rubbish bins rather than the recycle bin. So I'm really pleased with this initiative, and I should, commend the officers for putting this together, and also the fact that this was part of our in the strategy. I can't remember the strategy it was in. We did identify this as a project in one of our previous strategies, so I'm glad we've completed it almost when they're installed.
Further discussion? I might just say very briefly too, yeah, I think it is a really good project, and I note that there are some really significant partners with the city in this, including Brand Tasmania, Taswater and Pennicott Wilderness Journeys have all partnered with the city in funding this project and rolling it out. So it is a really good example of us collaborating with private and government organisations to implement our priorities, and doing that in a way that shares the load, I guess, rather than the council doing all of the work itself. So I'm looking forward to seeing the project implemented. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 9.2, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, I'd like to move this
Seconded
application,
by-
Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
So this is at 71A Letitia Street, and it's a public housing or a affordable housing, social housing initiative for 29 multiple dwellings and associated works. And Lord Mayor, it's in some ways an ideal place to build because on one side, over the brook, I might say, is the domain. On the other side, it's facing directly to a bowling green and the North Hobart Oval. To the other side, it's a car park, and then there are some residents who are adjoining as well. And there were 3 representations, but those issues that were raised, which included overshadowing and just residential amenity and a few of the landscaping issues, were generally picked up in the officer's report. So the officer's report was recommended for approval, subject to various conditions. At the planning meeting, we unfortunately, there was somebody who was sitting in the audience who hadn't registered to do a deputation, and he has subsequently contacted the council, and we have a couple of conditions, and it would be good if somebody could perhaps move those conditions as amendments. So unfortunately he couldn't speak at the meeting because the meeting the item had been considered. However, there should be some addressing of some of his concerns in relation to those amendments. So 29 multiple dwellings, which really does address some of the public housing and the housing issues that we have. The performance criteria were in a residential zone, so particularly the density, but setbacks, site coverage, sunlight to private open space, privacy for dwellings, frontage fences, waste storage for multiple dwellings were some of the things that had to be relied on through performance criteria consideration. but also parking and access, stormwater, historic heritage code, road and railway assets code, and attenuation code. So most of those performance criteria were met, and the officers have recommended it for approval, and I think it was unanimous at committee last week. So moved, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to move an amendment that the landscaping advice clause be included, as well as a condition with regard to the sill height, as per the memo on the hub.
Seconded by Alderman Baracus. Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Harvey beat me to that one. I was about to move the same thing. I think it's a reasonable condition that was requested, and I think this is a terrific project. I think it's in a good space. I think it's located well, and I think, as was discussed in depth during the meeting, the mixture of ability for people to use public or active transport or to drive is a good one, noting that not everybody that uses social housing necessarily requires or has access to a vehicle either. So I think it's a good mix, and I think it's something that's much needed for the city, and I would hope that everybody unanimously supports it.
Can I just ask about the correspondent also mentioned the construction management plan. Is that also conditioned into the approval?
Just bear with me, Lord Mayor. We'll just check that.
Lord Mayor, I think if I might be able to help,
Yep.
on that memo on page 2, just at the bottom of Ms Aby's advice, it says that the environmental management plan is only proposed to relate to the construction phase, so ongoing issues with noise will be governed by environmental legislation which prevents environmental nuisance being caused by one landowner to another. So I don't know if that satisfies your concerns.
No, it was around a construction management plan, but
Yeah,
it looks as though it's called a construction environmental management plan. Is that the same as a construction management plan?
Through you, Lord Mayor, that's correct. It deals with the sort of the significant issues for immediate neighbours.
Right. Okay. So,
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. Just a query, with regards to that particular communication that we've had, there was issue raised with regard to the trees and the excavation that will kill some of those trees. So my question is, who will be responsible for that? Is there anything in the system, or some clarification would be appreciated?
Is that covered in the landscape plan?
Yeah, look, Lord Mayor, the issue with adjacent trees, if they're not listed, they're not necessarily protected. You can't restrict necessarily development that occurs on a neighbouring property because your trees may have extended into that property. So it doesn't. The scheme does not afford those protections unless the trees and vegetation is specifically listed within the scheme. So I think we've included advice that if the proponent is proposing to use the adjacent neighbours' trees as part of their landscape plan, that they will have to demonstrate protection measures during construction phase to ensure that that plan can be achieved.
Thank you. Chair, I would also want to support this, and very thrilled, as it were, if I may use the word, it's an emotive term, but to see a collaboration, a working together of the state government and the centre care people. And I think this is a great project to go ahead. Even though it fails on the acceptable solution as far as the floor area is concerned, from 200 metres to 68, but the reasons given are quite convincing as to why we can justify this. And the other point that I also raised in the planning meeting was regards to parking. There was quite about 20 or 30 plus shortage. But again, the reasons given was very convincing that, you know, people in that situation or in that particular category tend not to have cars. So again, I would strongly support this and recommend this to the council. Thank you so much.
Any further discussion? None, I'll put, sorry, Councillor Sherlock.
So I was just going to be really brief and just support the comments that have already been made and commend this, and I think it's a really wonderful opportunity for us to do something constructive. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, I'll put the amendment first. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. So I'll now put the motion as amended. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 9.3.
Yes, Lord Mayor, this is again consideration under the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme, as was the last. So it's signage for 66 Hampton Road, Battery Point, and I'll put the motion. There was no agreement, so there was a 3-3 situation with this heritage issue, and I'll put the officer's report that it's recommended for refusal. So happy to move that and talk to that, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by the refusal, Councillor Sherlock.
Lord Mayor, it doesn't seem to matter too much. I mean, it's just a sign, but in fact, Battery Point is worth millions of dollars economically to this city every year as a tourism, heritage tourism destination, and that's why we have this officer advice to refuse this. It really to have rules in a planning scheme specific to a particular area, and we know full well that the Battery Point planning scheme previously was very protective not only of heritage but residential amenity, and again we're seeing this that it is important to have this for refusal, given that the signs are pretty consistent, or very consistent in that area. So I move the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've just got a question through you to the Director, if I could. What was the Heritage Council's view on this?
Mr. Noy.
Yes, Lord Mayor, it was for approval.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, this bore out in debate last week, but you know it was a split committee on this. Looking at the criteria that we had in front of us, and looking at the site, and it's a retrospective application, so we can already see what the site looks like, and the nature of the signage. Looking at it, can't reasonably see how what is there has any detriment to the heritage significance of that site at all. It's removed, it's separated from the building itself, and it's distinctly different. I don't think it in any way covers or overshadows any important parts of the significant heritage. If it did, the Heritage Council would be saying different things other than recommending approval. And as has been noted numerous times, and the Deputy Lord Mayor is right to say that the heritage in Battery Point is particularly important to this city. That's absolutely correct, and the people that live in Battery Point and work in Battery Point are very, very vocal in maintaining that and protecting that heritage. And the fact that no one seems to be at all uncomfortable about this or bothered by this, I think speaks to at least the community perception that what we have there currently on that site, and that signage that we have on that site, does nothing to detract or cheapen or lessen the heritage significance of that building, or furthermore detract from the heritage significance of the broader area. So I'll test the chamber right now, and I'll foreshadow, well not right now, I'll foreshadow, I'll be voting against the motion moved by the Deputy, and I'll be foreshadowing instead for approval. Lord Mayor.
I think it was Councillor Dutta up first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. The Heritage Council, I understand, has given the approval. Would it be correct to say that they have given an approval under a different act and not under the planning scheme?
Mr. Noy?
Yes, Lord Mayor, that is correct. They don't consider it under the planning scheme. They consider it under their own act.
Thank you. And the second question, a follow-up question. Would it be correct to say that the Heritage Council then in that letter stated that approval ought to be sought under the approval of a local council? Is that correct as well?
Mr. Noy?
Through you, Lord Mayor, that is a fact in terms of requiring council consent under the Land Use Planning Approvals Act.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, what we need to do is to be very careful when we're presenting these things. It's okay to bring this letter out to say it's been approved by the council, but anyone who understands common sense, as it were, and we talk about common sense, that when you look at this approval, it is approved under a different act. Now, you can't then transfer that approval and say it is okay under the planning scheme. I think that's where we've got to be a bit more careful as to how we're interpreting these things. Secondly, for me, the point was made that the community perception and there is no objection. Now, regardless of the fact, if there is no objection or 1,000 or 100 objections, it is our duty to look at it under the planning scheme and look at the acceptable solution and the performance criteria. Now, under that, when we put this under that test and with scrutiny, quite clearly, I would support the recommendation made by staff because it does not satisfy A and C of that. Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, I refer to page 371, attachment A, and I'll read out the discussion. Section 7. Planning approval is sought for signage at 66 Hampton Road, Battery Point. 7.2. Application was advertised and no representations were received. 7.3. The proposal has been assessed under the relevant provisions of the planning scheme and is considered to perform well. 7.4. The proposal has been assessed by other council officers, including the council's cultural heritage officer. The officers have raised no objection to the proposal subject to conditions. The proposal is recommended for approval. And then in the next line, the conclusion, the proposed signage does not satisfy the relevant provisions. So I wonder if that could be explained. And I read these reports carefully. Obviously others don't. But
The point of order, Lord Mayor.
What's the point of
The
order?
point of order is that Alderman Briscoe has just made a disparaging remark about other council elected members, which is really not appropriate or respectful.
I understand. I don't think it would. It's got to be offensive, and I don't think it would be offensive to the reasonable person. It was just. So I won't call that as a point of order.
Point of order. It is offensive to me as a planning.
I understand, Councillor Dutta, but I have to base it on the reasonable person test, and I think Alderman Briscoe was making a bit of a side remark that may be. That elected members don't like, but I don't think it would pass the reasonable person test as offensive.
thank you, Lord Mayor. I just would be interested in the planning officer's comments. Thank you.
Well picked up, Alderman Briscoe. Clearly, Section 7 does not reflect the conclusion nor 6.7.6 and the recommendation. So clearly an error on the part of the officers that this was included. But nevertheless, the conclusion and the recommendation stands.
Thank you. I'd just like to make some concluding remarks. Look, I accept that human error does come in, and huge reports these are as well. Look, I agree with totally what Alderman Baraka said. You walk along Hampton Road, this sign doesn't jar the landscape or the streetscape. It's a very, very subtle sign. It matches the sign that's over the doorway. I don't think it would offend anyone, and certainly not the heritage, the people who come to Battery Point to look at the heritage. But this is a working business. It's not a business for tourists. It's a working business, a health business, and I think it's fair enough to maintain that strip as a working part of Hobart, which has businesses that don't necessarily cater for tourists or visitors. I think it should remain.
Councillor Coates was up first.
Look, thank you. I'll speak on behalf of this motion, and at the outset, I guess I'll be supporting the foreshadowed. I'm glad to read the advice of the Hobart City Planning Officers. I think, as in most cases, at the end of the day, they will correctly so err on the side of caution when it comes to heritage matters, but ultimately the planning scheme is written such that in instances such as this, it comes to us as community representatives to ultimately assess it against and come to a determination and use our discretion and the evidence. And in my mind, part of that evidence is the fact that we haven't had representations. Part of that evidence is the fact that even though the sign already is there, I personally haven't received lobbying concerned about the heritage of this. And so look, I think it is very appropriate and good that we have this heritage advice, but when it comes to actually making the decision at this moment, we have to take into account all of the evidence, and I think the lack of community uproar and outrage about this does speak volumes. In my mind it does, and we ought to take that into account when we make a decision tonight. Ultimately what we have here is a business who, potentially if they'd gone down this process before putting the sign up, they may have redesigned it or may have redone it, but as it stands, there is a sign outside that premise. I don't think it detracts from the Battery Point Heritage Precinct. I think it is appropriate that a business that's operating in a legal and proper way does have the ability to let people know that they're there, and ultimately I think by having a sign there, it just assists people in being able to attend their appointment. So look, at the end of the day, we are representatives of the community, and in this case I think the community view ought to be that we allow that sign to remain. Thanks.
Alderman Thomas.
Yes, Lord Mayor. I think we have a public duty to accept this because we are here. We have an extremely involved, committed group of residents in Battery Point. They actually pull us up whenever they see something that they believe is wrong. We are, when you look at the original sign, it's got a line. There's very little other information on that sign to tell you what happens in that business. When you look at the new sign, we've got a phone number, we've got a website, and most importantly, we have 2 health practitioners that are listed, chiropractors. It's an important thing in a healthy environment that you know that you have practitioners in that building, you know who they are, they've revealed who they are, and they've put their website. Now that's practical, valuable information, and I don't want to be part of a decision tonight that says, no, your sign looks good, and there's been no complaints, but no, we don't want to have this. I mean, this is a very reasonable depiction of the services on offer. It fits in with the window shades in terms of colour. It fits in with the fence in terms of the stand. I think we would be seen as churlish not to approve this on this occasion. Now, if it doesn't happen, and they've got to pull the sign out, I think that's a real problem. And for those around this table that know the Battery Point community well, if there'd been a single issue of substance, we would have heard about it. We would have heard about it. So let's not take our interests from another part of Hobart and place them in the middle of Battery Point when we have a perfectly good application which deserves approval tonight.
Further discussion? Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, a couple of questions. So do signs normally need planning approval? And this sign hasn't got planning approval. It didn't have planning approval. So this is a retrospective application?
No.
Lord Mayor, that's correct.
So, Lord Mayor, if it had have gone through a planning process before installation, what would the outcome have been? The same as it is tonight? Through you, Lord Mayor? Well, it's not the outcome, the recommendation.
Lord Mayor, the recommendation would have been the same.
Okay. So I have issue with retrospective planning approvals because people do this all the time, hoping they can just have it approved because it's already there. And the argument is, well, you've already done it, you know, but that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at this as though there is no sign there. And it would have had a recommendation for refusal had it have gone through the correct process. So I'm not looking at a sign that's already existing. I'm looking at the process that says this sign doesn't comply. My second question is, how often do you get representations with regard to sign DAs? Through you, Chair. Lord Mayor. Go on.
Fairly broad question, I think.
Well, it is, and I'm reticent to suggest a response to that. Look, all I can say is it's not uncommon that we don't get too many representations in relation to signs.
Right. So I think the nature of it, you put a development application notice on the fence, and then it's up to people to go off to a website to have a look at the DA and make up their mind. And generally signs don't generate a lot of interest because, you know, it's a sign and nobody bothers to have a look and see what sort of sign it is. So I'm supportive of the Deputy Lord Mayor's. You've moved for refusal because if this didn't exist, it would still be a recommendation for refusal, and I'm going to back the officers here with their recommendation.
Further discussion? Can I ask a question just around if a new tenant moved in and they decided to put up a sort of, you know, neon yellow sign with this on this sort of existing structure, would that come back to us, or is this approval linked to the current design, which is fairly subtle, I think?
That's correct. I'm advised that it would come back as an application.
So any new artwork or any change in the sign would have to come back?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, you can certainly change the message, but you can't have it illuminated or change.
The colour?
You can have change in colour to a degree, but illumination would be a new application.
I'm just thinking about, there was some signs put in up at in Mole Street. There was sort of a bright screaming yellow with black. That sort of situation. I'm just concerned about that.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, you certainly could do that without necessary planning approval. So you could change the colour, you could change the messaging, the material, and the size, and the illumination would require a new application. But change in messaging, change in colouring could all be accommodated under this existing permit.
Deputy Lord Mayor?
Yeah, just to sum up, Lord Mayor, I suppose just to Councillor Coates' point first, I think he said, well, it's a sign and it's already there. Well, if it had been a sign which conformed to the Heritage Officer's recommendations, it would still be legible and you'd still know that that was whatever sort of practice it was. And just in relation to something that Alderman Thomas said, you know, like the neighbourhood hasn't complained about this, but actually the Heritage Officers have brought it to our attention, and quite possibly they may have even been told in relation to this being a non-conforming sign, no doubt. So, you know, like, this is Heritage Officers' advice. It's professional advice, which I'm not prepared to discount today.
Okay, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Say no.
No.
Show of hands, all those in favour.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Deputy Lord Mayor.
And all those against.
Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Fox, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe and Lord Mayor. It's lost, Lord Mayor, 3 votes to 7.
Okay, moving on. Oh, sorry. The foreshadowed motion.
I'll move that. I assume we have appropriate conditions through you.
Yes, it's just the standard first condition that we would impose on any application, given it's an existing sign.
By Alderman Thomas.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I think the debate's been had. I don't think I have anything more to contribute from what's already been said.
Yeah, I just wonder whether that issue of the permit, the sort of future, that any signage has to sort of be kept in these colours can be provided in some way, or this sort of subtle palette.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I think that's justified under the current circumstances.
So I don't know, is that some sort of amendment, or is it just?
I'm happy to move with the inclusion of such a condition,
Okay,
Lord
so,
Mayor, if the second is happy to.
The approval, but with the inclusion of a clause to indicate that it can't ever be, or the palette has to remain the same regardless of any change in future ownership or something.
It would need a new application.
Yes, Lord Mayor, it would be along those lines that the palette of colours are approved, and any change or significant change would require a new application. So we'd do it under those terms.
Sorry, Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. I was just wondering, through you to the director, given that we're approving a new sign, should we be considering whether or not they need the old one? Because it's not adding to anything. I mean, maybe we can't enforce it as a condition, but it does nothing more, and it's sitting outside the building. And why wouldn't we seek, at least ask them if they'd remove the existing one that's out the door?
Mr. Noy.
Yeah, look, it's not part of the application. I'd be reticent to suggest that, other than you could include that as an advice clause.
I'd like to, Lord Mayor, because I mean we're getting everything's on the sign out in the streets added to the other one. Didn't do anything, and why would we?
So that's the inclusion of the advice on that one
advice,
as well. So Alderman Thomas, you're happy to include both those things?
Yes.
The seconder? Yeah. Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, of the 9 parts of E17.7.2, only 2 of them had concerns by the previous report, which surprisingly and sensibly was rejected, the recommendation for refusal. So part A was be located in a manner that minimises impact on cultural heritage, significance of the place or precinct, and C, be of a size and design that would not substantially diminish the cultural heritage, significance of the place or precinct. And I think those 2, as a council, we decided by rejecting the previous motion that it does satisfy that. Those 2 are 2 of the, what did I say, 11? 2 of the 8. Just a question through you, Lord Mayor. We keep hearing that the Heritage Council or the council will have the full rights over heritage. When's that coming in? Hopefully soon.
Lord Mayor, there are limitations of that control, and they relate to properties that are listed by the Tasmanian Heritage Council. So, and that single control will be come into place when the new planning scheme is finally endorsed and approved by the Tasmanian Planning Commission, and that is likely to be at the end of next year.
So while you're on your feet, through you, Lord Mayor, a supplementary. So if that came into force now, this would not be before us.
That's correct, Lord.
Thank you.
Okay, so with those, any further discussion on the approval with those additions that we were that have been incorporated in. We don't have the exact wording, but I think we all get what they are. All those in favour say aye. Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Can't quite see Councillor Dutta. No, Councillor Sherlock, thank you. Councillor Coates, Councillor Fox, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta and the Deputy Lord Mayor. That's carried, Lord Mayor, 7 votes to 3.
Okay, we're moving on now to item 9.4.
Lord Mayor, if Alderman Barakis can introduce this, please, these next items.
Alderman Barakis, 9.4.
Thank you. Lord Mayor, I'll introduce this one. 9.4, Unit 1, 8 Oberon Court, Dunedin, change of use to visitor accommodation. Thank you. Lord Mayor, this is one of those ones that we've been getting quite often. It's a change of use to visitor accommodation. There was 2 representations received objecting to the proposal. It was recommended for approval subject to conditions, and it's before us because it was of a category called in by an elected member. Once again, Lord Mayor, this is but the committee found that, given the circumstances that we're in and the provisions of the planning scheme, ultimately we have little choice but to approve this one, given the likely result of if it was put through appeals. And there was comment made that we're looking forward to the implementation of the council's proposed changes. But I'll leave it there and just encourage everybody to vote in favour of this one.
I have a question. Given we put the recommendation up to the planning scheme several months ago, do we have any idea when that's going to be implemented or even looked at? Because we've had so many of these applications and we're losing so many homes to short stay accommodation because we can't do anything about it because we're operating under the current parameters of the law, but it is poor planning and poor decision making for our community.
Mr. Noy, question about the timing of the
Yes, I
forms.
think this was conveyed to elected members in the CEO's bulletin, but we anticipate the hearing dates to be the end of November by the TPC, and hopefully a decision is forthcoming shortly after that.
I understand that. Can I also ask a supplementary question? How many applications and approvals have we had in the time which we've passed this recommendation up to the planning scheme, waiting for their response?
Mr. Noy?
Lord Mayor, I don't have that figure at hand, but happy to take it on notice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further discussion? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I rise to speak against this application and bear in mind that we actually do have discretion to refuse this. It's not something that is here before us that we don't have the ability to refuse. So it'll be nice, perhaps with a new council we won't be talking about Groundhog Day. I don't know how many times I've heard that, but it's Groundhog Day for a lot of people who just do not have accommodation, and I take Councillor Fox's concerns directly on, because I think that's a really good point. But to this particular application, we did have representations in relation to this application from at least one direct neighbour. And the person, and I'll quote from the representation, "I'm not completely happy with the news." I think that's probably an understatement. This unit will now be visitor accommodation because it was previously uni student accommodation. She goes on to say that there are 8 bedrooms next door with both units and barely enough room for cars now, hence the restriction of parking already in this street. Already my privacy is impeded on when I'm on the lower deck, as they can look directly at everything you do within just metres from their deck. So this is, and interestingly enough, Lord Mayor, I was walking up Liverpool Crescent the other day, and spoke to somebody who was going into her house who said, I'm surrounded by visitor accommodation in this part of West Hobart. I have no privacy. I have both upstairs and downstairs of the neighbouring property, which was a house, which was a residential property, but is now commercial property. It is not being, you know, like I have no privacy. I feel like a fish in I feel like a goldfish in a fish bowl. So this is the impact that we're dealing with for our community. It is not only the impact of neighbours, but it is the impact, as Councillor Fox has alluded to, that is the impact on the broader community of hundreds of these houses over a good period that have gone to short stay accommodation. So I'll move a recommendation for refusal in relation to this, according to according to Planning Directive 6 on standards for visitor accommodation and parking and access code.
Sorry, what were the... Oh, I can ask a question about it later.
Yeah.
Okay. Further yeah, we're not at that stage yet. So, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I supported the amendment going to the Planning Commission. I do, in a way, understand the comments that Councillor Fox made. It does worry us that things move slowly, but a planning scheme is a long-term planning document. We have to follow the rules. The current rules, the officers have recommended approval. We know by a number of cases now that when these go to appeal, the officers cannot find planning officers or lawyers or experts to argue the case for refusal. And therefore it comes back to us enclosed, and we agree that for approval. So it's not our fault that the Planning Commission is taking its time, but it is our fault if we are making a roundabout way of getting, like we feel good if we refuse it, but we know that we'll come back.
Point of order, Lord Mayor.
What's the point of order?
Alderman Briscoe again is making the insinuation that this is only done by suggesting that it's a feel-good thing to do, and I take offence at that. I think he's speaking offensively yet again.
I think it's, again, I would say it's probably not the reasonable person test. Alderman Briscoe has a different view to you, and he's critical, but it would not be likely to be offensive.
So it's his insinuation, that he's making an insinuation, that's allowable, is it?
So basically, point of order 23D is if the councillor has been misrepresented during the debate. So if Alderman Briscoe had said that the Deputy Lord Mayor is just being, feel good and isn't doing the right thing here, then, and it was directed at you specifically, then that would probably be a point of order. So if Alderman Briscoe can just keep that in mind. So it is, a point of order does include that the councillor has been misrepresented during the debate. So that is something to keep an eye on.
Thank you for that. I haven't insinuated anything tonight, and you've now ruled twice that I haven't broken. There hasn't been a sufficient point of order that it was upheld. So,
point of clarification, I would also just like to state as a point of clarification.
Oh, but I'm on my feet. Who?
I'm making these decisions as a feel-good thing. It is...
Councillor Fox, there is no such thing as point of clarification for that purpose. So if you could just take your seat. You could maybe make... have you actually spoken on this item?
I asked some questions.
You can speak on the item and make your points then. Thank you.
I'll just repeat what I said in terms of I supported the amendment. I supported the amendment. However, we have to obey the law here, and I believe a sensible council, realising that we would not get planning experts to defend a refusal, sadly, then we have to think about the resources of this council. I would like, if I thought they had any remote chance of a refusal being upheld, then I would vote for it. But from the evidence that we have over the number of refusals that have come through this council and come back to us because the officers have not found any planning experts to defend the case of refusal, I think it is a sensible solution. We can make comments like I've just made that it's sad that the Planning Commission hasn't ruled on this. I hope they do rule on it. I hope it comes back that we can stop short stay accommodation of full houses in residential areas. I hope that. But the pragmatic point of view I've just made is that we're just causing time, effort and other resources for this council unnecessarily, because we know that will come back to us and we'll give it approval in a closed council meeting that we can't talk about.
Further discussion? Alderman Thomas?
Yes, I'm very disappointed, Lord Mayor, that we're not able to just replay what we said last time. You know, in other words, let's get the minutes and replay it, because it'll be easier than having to say it again. But the way in which the principle under the planning scheme is simple. You must, the people assessing the application must come to the conclusion that there will be, not maybe, a detriment. And it's the issue that's caused the problem, because the must is a command on the planning officer assessment that there will be a detriment caused by the application. This has proven too hard a test, too hard a hurdle. So like the rest of this council, we've unfortunately had to see this avalanche of applications, which was not unexpected. And it has led to hundreds of homes being taken out of the market at a very difficult time for this city, as indeed for Brisbane and other places that we're seeing nationally are taking action or attempting to take action in a rates embargoed way. I did and still concur with the applications made to the Planning Commission. I just think that as so many people are talking about this issue at the moment, the state government's bringing in its $10 billion worth of spend on 1,000 homes until 2033, that whilst we may well see, I suspect we will see a ban for this municipality, it would have been much better had it been considered for the whole state. But not only that, and I'm not saying that this would prove itself in the future, but there may well have been a caution that the ban would have applied for, let's say, 2 or 3 years and be reassessed with a proper evidence-based evaluation of the impact and effect of the ban on the supply of homes into the future, because there's so many other levers that are being used that we don't know the efficacy of half of the procedures and the methodology that's being applied as solutions or possible solutions. So I'll just make the point that, again, we are stymied at the moment. We're restricted in what we can do. And it's not just a case of not finding a lawyer to represent us. The reason we can't find a lawyer is because these guys, these hard-working people behind us, they came to the conclusion that unfortunately they couldn't refuse it, and they're experts and they can't find another expert to go against what they've decided. So their judgment is so sound that they can't find another lawyer or planning lawyer that's prepared to take opposition to the view that our expert officers have expressed. So it's not just a case of, oh, we can't find someone, they're all too busy. They can't take the case because they don't believe they can win it.
Councillor Fox.
I think that's all incredibly disappointing. We have the evidence and the research that demonstrates categorically that converting and the loss of whole homes to short stay accommodation is impacting significantly on the housing crisis. We have academic peer-reviewed research that states categorically that this is the case. I know that we have to operate under the current laws and whatever, but if they're not meeting the needs of the community, we change them, and that's what we're trying to do here. I understand that they haven't been changed yet because it's so slow, but I don't understand why we're not willing collectively to make a stand. And I have to call out Councillor Harvey here as well, because he's been voting to approve these short stay accommodations. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to cause offence to you, but
you don't get it. So.
Excuse me, just make your point, Councillor.
You've been supportive of refusing them up until the last couple of council meetings where it's been pointed out that we can't have...
Point of order. This is not about me. This is about the housing issue in front of us. Okay. So really, there's no need to talk about me as part of this issue.
Yeah, through the chair.
Because he's supported them, when in the past he has not supported them.
Okay. But through the...
Do you need to?
I do, because I think it's important for people to know
Councillor Fox,
that you flip-flopped on this.
If you could go through the chair, don't address your comments to Councillor Harvey directly.
My apologies for doing that through the chair to you, Councillor Harvey, but I do think it's not great to flip-flop on these issues, because it does impact the housing crisis. It does impact housing affordability and accessibility. And yeah, I just think this is really pathetic. And I'm also really sick of having these arguments. We've got a recommendation up to the planning scheme and we've received a flood of these applications, and it does have a demonstrable, whatever, impact on housing affordability and accessibility in our local government area. It is poor planning to continue approving these, and I don't understand why we as a collective can't take action on this and take a stand and say, this is enough. We can't do anything. We've put up this recommendation. Put a hold on it. Put a hold on these applications or something. There must be some legal lever that we can pull to say we need to put a hold on these applications until we've assessed this, because it is damaging our community. Hobart is now just a city for millionaires, and I think that's terrible. I and all of my friends are priced out of a city. We can't live here. We all work and study here, but we can't afford to live here because of decisions like this. And they're all coming down to these individual applications, and we just keep approving them because that's what the law says that we have to do. What, can I ask a question? What is the point of us having discretionary power if we don't have discretionary power to approve or reject these applications?
Did you want to... Was that a rhetorical question, or you'd like...
I would like an answer.
Mr Noy, discretion.
The terms under which we can use that discretion are outlined in Planning Directive number 6. That is a state government directive. We are obliged by law to uphold the provisions of that directive, and they are limited in the extent in which we can refuse applications. I understand the frustration. The officers share that frustration. We have recommended changes to the scheme. They have to go through a process, and we are left with the current provisions to enforce.
I understand. Thank you very much for your answer, Mr Noy. Can I ask if we have been lobbying the Minister or the government on this matter beyond putting the actual recommendation up to the planning scheme? Because we did that because the state government told us that we could and that we should. Have we been doing any work to push that forwards? Because it has been so long and so slow, and I'm really concerned, and I'm speaking up such a lot now because this might be my last or second last, as I now find out, meeting of this term, and I don't know that I'll retain my seat, and I don't really care. So I'm doing everything that I can now while I can to say what I need to on behalf of the people who I represent, which are the people who can't afford to live in this city.
Question for Mr. It's really for the CEO, probably, about lobbying of the state government around the provisions.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and through to you, Councillor Jacks. There has been a range of activity underway around influencing and sort of lobbying at a state and national level in this space, mostly through Lord Mayor in regards to the Capital City Lord Mayor's network. It's also been picked up in a number of meetings that we've had with relevant ministers and MPs locally from a state perspective, and has formed one of the priority areas of intergovernmental relations advocacy focus as part of our regular program that we undertake around those key meetings. So there have been a range of issues raised, and certainly officers in Mr noise department working really hard, also with our legal counsel around getting those hearing dates as soon as we can to progress the work going forward. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for your answer. And just very quickly, I think that's great. I guess I can't express deeply enough the frustration that I feel and that I know is in the community, because we've got people sleeping in parks and that population is growing, and that's from kids up to adults and families who are sleeping in cars and sleeping in parks. And this isn't the only cause of that, but it is not helping. And I find it incredibly frustrating that we can spend so much time talking about a sign in Battery Point in front of a business, but we can't do anything about this. I'm personally disgusted to be part of this conversation. Thank you, I'm finished.
Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, we recently saw reports that Hobart's the most expensive capital now for finding accommodation in the country, and I was quite disturbed by that. So we've gone from being one of the most affordable cities to now the most expensive for rental. We also know that we're losing 14 houses per month to short stay accommodation. That was the figure that was reported to the Planning Committee not that long ago via a question that I asked: how many houses per month are we losing, or how many houses are we losing since we introduced this push to move an amendment. We've also heard tonight that the amendment will hopefully be completed at the end of November. I'll just check that again. Is that correct?
Denoy.
The hearing date's scheduled for the end of November. When the determination is likely to occur, one would hope that it may be before Christmas.
Okay, the excellent Christmas gift to Hobart. We know short stay accommodation has had an impact on the cost of housing. We know that we've got 10% of our rental stock which is short stay accommodation. We also know that PD 6 has been a blunder from the state government, which has allowed short stay accommodation to run rampant in Hobart. We also know that we have tested refusing these short stay accommodation applications on a number of occasions, and we know that we can't find people to defend them. So in effect, refusing them has not had the desired outcome. So we have wasted a bit of time with these refusals. So now we've just got to hope that the Tas Planning Commission expedites the process and delivers an amendment to the planning scheme as soon as possible. So flip-flopping is not the right word, being a bit more practical, that we can't defend the decisions, and we've tried it, we've tested it at least 4 times to try and get planners to defend a decision for refusal, and it hasn't worked. So that tactic I don't support anymore. There's also been applications with 0 representations, which doesn't help as well. So while I don't like approving this short stay application tonight, and there's other ones to follow as well, we're in a position where we can't defend a refusal because we can't find anybody to defend it in the tribunal. And as I said, we've tested it 4 times at least, and we haven't had an outcome. So I think at this point in time, we've got to just be patient and wait for the amendment to come through, which will ban short stay accommodation in residential areas across Hobart. Now, that doesn't include short stay accommodation in commercial areas or mixed business areas. It's only residential accommodation. Hence, we had one recently that was for 15 short stay accommodation units in a mixed business area. So there was no reason for refusal of that, even though we don't like it necessarily, some people, but we couldn't refuse it. And tonight, unfortunately, we can't refuse this one because we're in a position where we can't defend it. Now, I've got to be practical about this, and the tactic of refusing them hasn't been effective.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to, all the points that has been made, I take them on board, and I want to come back to what we have been told, that we need to look at it under the law. and this is what I want clarification on. Clause 3(1)(e)(p)(1) states clearly, vista accommodation must be compatible with the character and use of the area and not cause an unreasonable loss of residential amenity, having regard to a number of elements or factors mentioned in there. My question is, what constitutes an area?
Mr. Noy?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, I think the tribunal has in the past used a figure of a radius of 200 metres.
Thank you. Lord Mayor, I have read these various vista accommodation, and I asked the question at the city planning, and I ask again. There have been 3 different factual statements. One is in here which refers to 600 dwellings and then gives a percentage. And then in the other one, if you have read, and I suppose most of us read these things, it refers to 100 meters in the proximity of it. And then the third one refers to 200 meters in the proximity of it. My question is, why the discrepancy and what's the rationale behind that?
Mr. Noyes, sorry, Councillor Dudder, I think you're talking about the 3 reports on visitor accommodation in the agenda tonight. So the discrepancy,
Sure.
Mr. Noy.
Look, I think as I responded at the committee meeting, I think that there wasn't evident to me, and we were seeking some clarification on that point and greater consistency in the reporting.
Thank you. And the final question that I have under the same clause, 3(1)(e)(p)(1), and C says, the scale of the use and its compatibility with the surrounding character and use. So there are 2 elements in there, in that particular clause C. The scale of the use. Need a clarification. When we use the word the scale of the use, does it mean the extent of the use of the visitor accommodation that might impact on the area?
Mr. Noy?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, the scale of the use that's subject to the application, so the actual site, as opposed to scale of activity of that use within the immediate surrounds, is my interpretation of that clause.
Just a follow-up question, Lord Mayor. So if that's the interpretation, I want to ask a question. Do we have any cases whereby we have the evidence to say that interpretation has been tested and tried, and that's the position we take?
Mr. Noy, test cases?
Yes, Lord Mayor, as you rightly know, there hasn't been any test cases around this provision. They haven't been fully tested before the tribunal, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, when you consider these things, when we ask the question under these clauses, we don't have the evidence. And I think that is the difficulty with some of us who are sitting on this table. We are simply presenting a different interpretation. We interpret it differently. We have no evidence as far as noise is concerned, as far as the scale is concerned, as far as what constitutes an area. Now, so when we look at the argument from that perspective, we can say we are refusing this on the basis of clause 3(1)(a), because it is a strata title. It says 200 meters of area. It goes to 220. Now, then it comes to the performance criteria and gives us these different elements to test. And I'm simply again and again asking for evidence. There is no evidence. I'm asking for interpretation. That is one interpretation we can take. And therefore, as an elected member, we are all in a position to take a different interpretation and support that using our discretion. And that is what I'm going to do. Thank you so much.
Further discussion? Can I just ask a question just on the foreshadowed? What would be the reasons for refusal?
Lord Mayor, I would suggest the 3.1E unreasonable loss of residential amenity. That's, I think Mr. Noy might agree that that is not necessarily something that his officers are going to support, but it is the reason for refusal.
Is that correct, Mr. Noy? Is that under PD? Is that allowed under PD? Or is that discretionary under PD 6?
It is, Lord Mayor, and if that's the concern of the elected members, based on their own view, then that's perfectly acceptable, even though it mightn't be able to be supported.
Okay, further discussion on the recommendation for approval? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no.
No.
Oh, show of hands, all those in favour.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
And against?
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. That's lost Lord Mayor, 5 votes all.
With the foreshadowed motion as just discussed.
All those in favour of refusal say aye.
Do you want to second it?
Oh, sorry, seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe. And that motion's lost Lord Mayor, 5 votes all.
Okay, so I think that one will be determined by the officers. We'll move on now to
Ask a question just to absolutely certain through you, Lord Mayor, to the Director.
I think we've clarified.
No, I think
we don't need a question.
I'm asking a question, Lord Mayor. You can't refuse me a question.
Finish that item now. We're moving on to the next one.
I can ask a question, Lord Mayor.
You can, and I think we've.
And so you're refusing me to allow me to ask a question.
I think
because to clarify to the people,
the officers will be determining the recommendation.
That's
yes.
right. So therefore, my question was, what will the officers determine? Whether it's approval or refusal, which is for approval. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
9.5, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Oh, I'm going to get Alderman Barakis to move this one as well, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll move item 9.5, 4 Thelma Drive, West Hobart, change of use of visitor accommodation.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. There's another 3 of these, and very much like the same circumstances as the previous item, Lord Mayor. This one had no representations and has been called before council because it's in a category that's been called in by an elected member. Lord Mayor, just to touch on a few things that were said before, because they pertain to this application as well. We do have discretion, as was said, but we don't have an infinite scope for that discretion, as was indicated by others. We are limited by the rules of the day, and I really appreciate the concerns here, and I appreciate what Councillor Harvey said. I know that this is an issue that is close to his heart, but he's been able to acknowledge the reality of the situation the council's currently in. We have, this council did vote to change the rules, and that is a process that is currently underway. It's not really a process that can be sped up any more than what it already is, because that's how the legislative process works and how the planning commission works. But we are at the moment bound to measuring these applications according to the rules of the day. We do have discretion within those rules, but if something is clearly compliant with the rules of the day and the applicants have done what they need to do to comply and put something forward that is within the rules, as this council repeatedly says, why aren't applications within the rules? We are just as bound to follow those rules as everybody else is. The issue of evidence is also another one that gets raised on these items, and it's right, there's a complete lack of evidence here, but the lack of evidence is to how the officer's recommendation on this isn't correct. We've had applications for short stay that I think we've all voted against, or we've all voted to refuse, sorry, to say more accurately. That's because there's been circumstances or issues with that application, such as that one on Sandy Bay Road, and such as another one that was more recently, I can't remember the Newtown, the location of that one.
Too much information.
But there have been circumstances in those applications where this council, I think rightfully, was able to determine that there was enough evidence pointing to those applications not being compliant with the rules of the day. Ironically, I also think that those applications are the ones that would have come to this council regardless of whether it was called in by another elected member. So while I do appreciate the concerns that not just people around this table have, but people in the public have around this process, we are limited by the scope of the planning scheme. We do have a duty and a responsibility as members of the planning authority. And the reality is, if we put these applications and if we refuse these applications, as Councillor Harvey said in the previous item, this has been tested by us in the sense that we've refused applications. They've gone to the applicants have received their refusal. They've appealed them, and we've been told by our expert planning officers who have gone out and tried to do what they need to do to defend these in the tribunal. It's not that we haven't been able to find planners to defend this application. There's plenty of planners out there. The reality is we haven't been able to find a single planner willing to accept this case and defend it on its merits, because there are none. So I appreciate that we're changing the rules, and when the rules change, we'll assess, or those of us that are still around will assess the applications according to the rules of the day then. But at the moment, we have the rules in front of us, and these applications are compliant, so we are bound to approve them. Otherwise, we'll end up in that same situation where we refuse them, they come back to us, and not only will there be a cost to us financially, there'll be a cost to this council's reputation amongst the planning, in regards to its position as a planning authority. So I'd urge everybody to do the right thing on this, approve this, and once again, appreciating the concerns around this issue. We do have a change of rules coming. It's coming in the next few months, hopefully, and then we'll move on from there. But at the moment, moving for a rejection here will do absolutely nothing in stopping this application from going ahead in the future.
Councillor Fox.
I'd like to copy paste all of my responses to the previous item for this, but in addition, I would just like to ask a couple of questions. This is a 4-bedroom home, whole home, that has been converted to short stay accommodation. Can I just ask what the floor area is for this property, internal?
Lord Mayor, I understand it's 245 square metres.
And a supplementary question, can I ask what the approval is for, what the square footage is for approvals under PD6?
No, I think it's related to the acceptable solution.
That's correct, 200 square metres, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So I understand this is significantly larger than what is permissible under PD6. So I understand that we do have discretionary power to refuse this application without going against the law, guys. So we can keep a whole home on the market for a family instead of converting it to short stay accommodation, perfectly within our legal rights.
Any further discussion?
Oh, I'd just like to test that, just if I can, Lord Mayor, just to ask, and if this is true, can we go back to the Director through you on that particular issue that Councillor Fox has raised?
It's all in the planning report, I think. Mr. Noy, would you like to comment on? It's probably quite a long question to respond to.
Look, the officers have worked through that, and their arguments in their case are outlined within the report.
I can't hear you, Mr. Noy.
Sorry, the officers have assessed that aspect and has documented that position within the officers' report, and they are satisfied that it satisfies the performance criteria in relation to size.
Clarify, and the performance criteria, does it have to satisfy every single one of them? The six or seven, isn't there?
Yes, Lord Mayor, it does have to satisfy every performance criteria.
Okay. Any further discussion? Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, interesting. This property was known as 156 Forest Road, and I was about when there was a subdivision up there, a very contentious subdivision, which ended up there was objections to a subdivision in the 90s of some very close cleared land for houses. And if you go up to this particular subdivision now, there's heaps and heaps and heaps of houses. But the community objected to having so many houses so close. Thank goodness the council did agree to the subdivision, and there are houses built up there. Now, it is a very expensive area, I must admit, and I agree with Councillor Fox here. I don't like living in a town where we're all millionaires if we own property in the city. I think it's not the Australian way. But it is a sad reality that houses are up this area. They go for 1.8 million, 2 million, 2.5 million. These are not rental houses for a family on the minimum wage. These are high-end houses. Sadly, there's no social housing up there. It is a millionaire's row up there, a multi-millionaire's row, and they're still building multi-million-dollar houses up in this subdivision. This one will not be in the rental market ever, I can imagine. It's not taking, it would be in the exclusive zone if it wasn't visitor accommodation. Now, I'm not arguing that this should be visitor accommodation, I'm just going on the planner's report. There are no objections. There are no objections, no representations against that. And that is a key, demonstrates even this community of multi-millionaires who live up the road here in their multi-million-dollar houses, they have not objected to it being short stay. And that is telling, I think. And probably I should leave it at that, because I don't believe that refusing this will provide a house for minimum income families.
Lord Mayor, I just urge you to have a look at page 548, figure 2. It's a rear view from of the house and the front view. It looks like a perfectly good house for a family, but sadly this is a change of use that's been applied for. I won't wax lyrical about this. I'll just recommend, I'll foreshadow again a refusal for this, subject to the conditions as described.
Okay. Can I just, Councillor Coates, yes.
Thank you. Look, just something that hasn't been touched on in all the debates so far tonight, but we have heard from a director that there is potentially a ruling that's going to happen this year. When that ruling comes in place, we would hope that people would follow that ruling and abide by the planning scheme as it's amended. We undermine the credibility, I believe, if we ourselves don't follow the planning advice and the planning scheme as best we can. And sometimes when you're applying the planning code, sometimes we have professional planners that apply it, and we get one professional planner saying it complies and one that says it doesn't comply. But we need to be as, it might go against our personal desires and wishes, but I think that if we expect people to follow the rules, we ourselves, as best possible, need to also follow the rules. And my fear would be that if on a strongly held principle, these are rejected and not based on evidence before us and qualified advice, we won't see these applications before us. People will just go out and do it. If we're not upholding the planning scheme and saying to all and sundry, look, provided you follow by this planning scheme, the local government will support you in your actions, but if you don't go outside that, we'll take enforcement action. But if we ourselves aren't seen to be following it, and I do fear that having all these debates, having all these cases that get brought before us with, in my view, a little evidence to support them, and if we do go down the path of just constantly finding ourselves in tribunals and inactions, it actually undermines the credibility of the council, of the reputation of a local government, and it does run a risk of having a more detrimental impact further down the track. If the amendment does get up, these applications, as I understand it, won't be valid. Some of these people, upon receiving these rejections, might just turn around and say, well, to be honest, who cares what the planning scheme says? The government's never going to follow that anyway. The local government's never going to follow that anyway. And so we'll just go ahead and do it regardless. And I do fear that we will see and encourage a sort of black market, if you like, of activity, but ultimately is undertaken without the sanction of the local government. So, look, I would just urge members to sort of keep that in mind when making a decision on these items tonight. Thanks.
Councillor Harvey.
I've got a question or two, Lord Mayor. Firstly, how many councils in Tasmania have proposed planning amendments to ban short stay accommodation in their areas?
No.
Look, I'm not really aware of that. There has been some suggestions in some East Coast towns.
So just Hobart?
Yeah, there's certainly planning scheme amendments. It's just Hobart.
Just Hobart? And Lord Mayor, one more. So just how many in Australia do you think have you heard of?
Look, there are other jurisdictions. New South Wales, for example, introduced some progressive restrictions around short-stay visitor accommodation.
Statewide?
Statewide, but they are nuanced between different areas. So, yeah, they are a little bit more sophisticated than statewide prohibition.
Mm. So, Lord Mayor, I think the point is that this council, even though we're in a bind at the moment with current applications for short stay accommodation, I think this council, regardless of who is at the table after this election, can still be proud that we are the leading council in Tasmania to push for a solution to short stay accommodation in residential areas. So we've led the country on a number of issues across time. We're leading the state on this issue. So we're in a bind at the moment because we haven't yet settled that amendment. So when that does get settled, and if there is an amendment to the planning scheme that prevents further short stay accommodation, then this council can hold its head high and say, well, we did what we could to try and alleviate the problem of short stay accommodation. And I think that vote, if I go back into the recesses of my mind, was something like 10 votes to 2. So this council does have a track record of trying to limit short stay accommodation. So I think we can hold our heads high down the track that we've made a huge commitment to that.
Discussion, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, the statement has been made that we must or we ought to follow the rules, and this is very true. My decisions, and I'm sure the others as well, we want to follow the rules which is given to us under the planning scheme. And the rule here for me is very simple, on which I am putting this argument. I'm following the rule. The rule is clause E, 3(1)E. My apologies, just got the wrong one here. My apologies. Now, with regards to the scheme itself, it says about the area, and it has failed under that particular acceptable solution, which our particular point was made quite clearly. Now, having said that we are looking at the rules, under this rule, it has failed. Okay, 3(1)E, A1. And then we look at, again, the rule itself, 3(1)E, 1P, and it states, again, a number of elements in there that we have argued, and we're simply taking a different interpretation or different position. Like in the case of Battery Point, it was expert, qualified advice, and yet members here on this table argued against it, used their discretion and voted for it. It's quite okay. There's no objection from me. I understand that each one of us look at things differently, and therefore we are entitled to do that. So in this particular point here, I've asked the question many, many times. You will find that, one, the area, what constitute, there is a discrepancy. The area, the whole suburb is used. In here, it is 200 meters, and in the other one, you will find it will be 100 meters. So there are discrepancies. There are different evidences that are brought to us. Now, when I ask about noise, etc., again, we don't have the evidence. We can make assertions like this, our staff are able to do. They make assertions based on these particular elements. Hence, we as well make assertions and then use our particular judgment and discernment to do this. So my point that I'm making is this: I'm definitely following the rule. You know, I always follow the rule. And the rules are, as I've stated, clause 3, 1E, A1 and P1. That's on that basis that I'll be refusing. Thank you.
Further discussion? No further discussion.
Just a question. I've just realised that. Can I ask a question about? It appears that not all of the dwelling will be used for visitor accommodation. It does say in the report something about a master bedroom and a suite is not available. Does that mean that it will be the owner will be using that?
Yeah, look, it may be that those rooms are excluded from that use by short-term visitors. That can often be the case where room are excluded by lock and key, so it's not accessible for that purpose. So what I'm trying to say is it's not necessarily meaning that that the owner will be present while it is being occupied by visitor accommodation. For the purpose of visitor accommodation, simply means that it's not accessible for that use.
On the supplementary question, on the alternative is that when there's not a visitor accommodation, it may be available for the owner.
That's correct. That's correct.
Alderman.
Just a question off the back of that. Sorry, if the application specifies that certain rooms and bedrooms won't be made available or aren't forming part of this application for short stay, would that then make it not a whole home listing?
No. It is. The building will be exclusively used for visitor accommodation, and so will not be jointly occupied by the owner while it's being used for visitor accommodation.
Fair enough.
So it's whole dwelling.
I'll put the approval. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Against.
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. It's lost, Lord Mayor. 5 votes to all.
Foreshadowed motion as described, Lord Mayor.
All those in favour of the refusal say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands. All those in favour.
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas and Alderman Briscoe. It's lost, Lord Mayor. 5 votes all.
So that'll be determined by the officers. Moving on now to 9.6, 126 Davy Place.
This one as well, Lord Mayor. 126 Davy Place, South Hobart.
Alderman Thomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is another one. No representation. Recommended for approval. No representations made. Delegated to council because it is of a category of applications that have been called in by an elected member. Lord Mayor, I'm happy for my remarks on the previous two items to apply to this one. Once again, on the basis of evidence and the limitations of our scope to refuse these applications. We receive a lot of information about these, and as I've said, there have been times where I think the majority of the council has rightfully concluded that there are grounds and merit to a refusal on these applications, and the example was made about an earlier item in Battery Point of the signage, and the fact that we used our discretions there, and that is correct. However, the difference between that and these applications is that that application, we had a recommendation for refusal by the officers, but we also had other things suggesting that exercising those discretions were appropriate relative to the planning scheme, relative to those provisions as to the impact of the heritage and so on and so forth, including the Heritage Council report. With these applications, whilst we have a lot of, and I think genuine, heartfelt concern about the impact on the housing market, we don't have anything anything relevant to the provisions of PD6 or the planning scheme. We don't have any evidence or anything to suggest that what the officers have presented to us isn't an appropriate recommendation. I'm definitely not the person to say that every single application, 100% of the time, we should always take or follow or vote in line with what the officers have said. Otherwise, there'd be no point in us being here as a planning authority, and maybe that's a separate conversation. But when we do deviate from the officer's recommendation, we always need a good reason to do so under the rules of the day. And many times we do, but we do have to justify why we think something complies or doesn't comply contrary to the officer's recommendation. When we have these applications that come before us, as far as the arguments that are relative to the planning provisions, I'm yet to hear anything beyond speculation and assumption as to why something might not comply. And that is why when they do go to appeals and we do get advice back to council, not a single expert planning lawyer in the state of Tasmania is willing to accept that there is even enough merit that they're willing to take the job. Noting that most lawyers are hired guns that are willing to take money for just about anything. They're not even willing to risk their own reputation in defending this for a pretty healthy paycheck. We do need to be cognizant of that and cognizant of the reputational damage we have when operating as a planning authority. So I know the deputy has indicated her irritation at me using the word Groundhog Day, but when we have applications where everyone gets up and says the same thing on every single item that they've said on every other item when it comes to these. So beyond this, I'm just happy to take my previous comments as read.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I suppose Groundhog Day is one thing, but originality is another, which is sometimes lacking. So I'll move recommendation for refusal. I won't go on, but just draw your attention to page 580, the Planning Directive number 6P2, and it's about the stratum title, the strata scheme to visitor accommodation, and how this doesn't comply. There's no doubt an unreasonable loss of residential amenity, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coates, I think, was up before you the first time.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I just wanted to note, having read through the officer's recommendation, I'm glad that when they're assessing local area, they do change a little bit. It would make no sense to me that it was consistent. If I was assessing something in North Hobart, I wouldn't want the local area to contain 2 kilometres away in Battery Point. If you're looking at something in a rural area, the local area may well include something 2 kilometres up the road. In this case, they have noted there is multiple visitor accommodations in the local area already, and they have noted the density of visitor accommodation in this suburb is actually very low. So look, that does give me a lot of comfort that they have done their job very well, and they have done a very thorough assessment of the local area in this case, and I find myself agreeing with the qualified advice.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat myself. I just wanted to state for the public record that this is a nice modern 2-bedroom unit within walking distance to the CBD and the university, so it would be really fantastic to see a young couple maybe living there, or some students, or a young family. Instead, we're going to see it converted to a short stay accommodation, and that really sucks.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, just to point out the obvious, there's no representations against. Also, I note in the report that council records indicated the permit was issued to a previous owner for change of use to visitor accommodation on the 5th of June 2015. But because the council couldn't confirm through its records that the use had commenced within 2 years of the permit being issued, that's why a permit has been applied for. This has got slightly different circumstances than the previous 2 or 3, or what have we got up to, 3 or 4? 3? And I think, again, I'm not going to repeat the things I said before.
Okay, if there's no further, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question. And the question is, the Vista accommodation, is it classified as commercial residential or is it residential still?
Mr. Noy.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, for the context of my response is in relation to planning considerations, not necessarily for the purposes of rates or the like, but from a planning perspective, we would treat this land use short-stay visitor accommodation for a complete dwelling as a commercial activity.
Thank you very much. I draw the attention to page 581 of the planning meeting, and I think it's 6.75, but I'll just read this in here. It says, it is considered that Vista accommodation is not dissimilar to the residential use, and as such, the proposed use is considered to be compatible with the character and use of the area. Now, there's a big difference in my own anecdotal experience that if you have a visitor accommodation, people come for a few days. It is not the same as those who are residing as a resident in that place. Because as residents, you want to build a rapport, a relationship, and there is a greater community understanding. As commercial visitors to the place, you come in for a few days, you do your thing, there is no connection to community. You don't bring that understanding, as it were, or the commitment that I will need to build a relationship and behave in a different way. So for me, the point is very clear that it is considered that the Vista accommodation is not dissimilar. In my view, as we have heard, it is dissimilar because it is a commercial enterprise. And on a similar vein, I think the principle at Battery Point was the same, because we were going to destroy the fabric of that particular community, and hence the decision was made differently. And therefore, on that basis, the statement made by council staff, I held a different view. The view is that I think it is going to be dissimilar, because one is a commercial and one is a residential, and therefore the residents behave differently.
Alderman Barakis.
Just a question, Lord Mayor, through you to the Director. Is personal relationships with residents a provision under the planning scheme that we can assess?
I think it's about residential amenity. I think it's... Alderman Barakis, I just think you're maybe trying to draw Mr Noy into the debate a bit. I think Councillor Dudley was talking about residential amenity.
A question, I've already spoken. Question, is this the area that contains Jane Franklin Hall, a considerable student accommodation area?
Yes, Lord Mayor, it does.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion,
Yes,
I'll put
there's just one.
Alderman
Thank
Thomas.
you. Lord Mayor, my son was an Olympic hurdler, and the hurdles were at a certain height, and he managed to get over them until the end of the semi-final in London. But the reality here is we are posed with a hurdle that is a legal hurdle. It's a hurdle that no one has passed. We can't even get a hurdler to actually try to get over it. It's very unfortunate, and I'm reminded of a time when I worked in the City Solicitor's office in Brisbane, and the City Solicitor of the day was called to a meeting regularly of the General Manager and the Senior Executive. And when he was late, the Lord Mayor of the day used to say, now listen, Mr City Solicitor, you are 10 minutes, 15 minutes late, and that has cost us this much money in terms of staff time and council time. Now, I don't think, he's gone, he's long gone, and so are the people who are probably in that conversation, but can you imagine the thousands of dollars that we have now spent sitting around this table, and not just that, the time that's taken this planning group to look for the non-existent planners. Now, I agree and I concur that we have found a couple of instances out of 20 or 30 that have shown that we had something whereby we hung a mantle and said no. But I think that somebody out there would be able to say, we have listened to this for 3 months. We have sympathy Lord Mayor. We have sympathy with what the council's trying to say. I am actually amazed at the tenacity of the people around this table, because some of the ways in which we've tried to get over that hurdle are really, really impressive. I've seen different distinctions. I've seen ways in which I think that the lawyers around this table have actually carved out distinctions that have attempted to get them around the hurdle, but you're still trying to get under the hurdle, and the hurdle is still as high as this. And I think we've got one more of these to go tonight, and then let's hope that the Planning Commission does its job. And I'm sad. I agree with that Councillor Harvey, that in reality it's a great thing that we're doing what we're doing, but it would be fantastic if the Planning Commission was doing it for the whole state, because I believe it is an issue for the whole state, but we are a leader, but we have to wait for that hurdle to be lowered so we can actually get through it.
Further discussion? I might just say a couple of things very quickly, and just to ask. I really don't appreciate some of this rather speculative statements that not a single expert planning lawyer is willing to take the case. We don't know that yet, Alderman Barakis. We're not even at that stage yet, and I will ask the Planning Director, has there been a test case, not so much on this particular one of strata title, but on the test case of rejecting a visitor accommodation over 200 square metres, which I must emphasise for everybody around the table, whole homes more than 200 square metres are not meant to be approved. Yes, there's performance criteria, and we are meant to get over 6 or 7 hurdles, and I don't think that the evidence is being collected, and we are testing anyone, any planner, Hobart, Launceston, Burnie, Devonport. I don't think it's being tested in the planning tribunal. There's this kind of like collective, like, oh, we just won't go there. But Mr. Noy, have we discovered whether there has been a test case on visitor accommodation and PD6 in this state yet?
Through you, Lord Mayor, none that has specific reference to these provisions, as I understand it.
So let's not pretend that these are laws where we are flogging a dead horse, where there's been evidence collected, but this is completely out of scope of the law. The law says that there should not be visitor accommodation approved in strata title buildings where there's mainly residential, or where there's a house over 200 square metres. This is, so we should be honouring that is the ultimate goal of trying to constrain the growth of visitor accommodation. That was what the state government was trying to do, and there hasn't been a test case. There haven't been planning lawyers say that they won't go here because there's been this such a record of a history of test cases that demonstrate this law is just not worth testing. It hasn't been tested. There hasn't been evidence collected. So all we're doing, I know it's frustrating, but all we are doing is trying to honour the fact that the laws do try and restrain growth of visitor accommodation. They do try and place some definitions around it, and we're really just trying to implement what the law says. I appreciate that the performance criteria, our officers are satisfied, but based on the reports, I don't feel that the performance criteria is being adequately tested with evidence, and because of the significant impact of this on our housing market, and because the acceptable solution clearly says this should not be visitor accommodation, I feel very comfortable in saying that I have to refuse these proposals. Okay, all those in favour of the refusal say aye, or approval say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Aye. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Harvey, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
And against?
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. And that's lost Lord Mayor, 5 votes all.
And
Foreshadowed motion.
shadowed for a refusal. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
Was there a
Show-
second?
Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye. Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor,
Against.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe. It's lost, Lord Mayor, 5 votes all.
And that'll go to the officers for determination. And the final one is 9.7. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Last one, 20 Bailey Street, Glebe, change of use to visitor accommodation.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, this is another one. One recommended for approval under PD6, one representation opposing the proposal. Called in because it is of a category called in by an elected member. Lord Mayor, I'm just happy to take my comments on previous items as read on this.
Further discussion. Councillor Fox.
Ask how this was approved under PD6, given the floor space is 221 square metres, and under PD6 it is not permissible.
Through you, Lord Mayor, the provisions of PD6 does provide for performance criteria that of proposals that exceed the 200 square metre limit, and if it's the officer's view that it satisfies those performance criteria.
Councillor Fox.
Not going to repeat myself once again, just going to state for the public record that this is a whole home, 3 bedrooms in the Glebe. Again, fantastic for a family, perhaps. Hope we don't lose this one.
Okay. Further discussion. Alderman Briscoe, I think you're up first.
Thank you. Just I've read through the representation. Last time I looked at rentals in the Glebe, around about $650 a week. That's for a pretty basic one. I don't think this is going to help the housing crisis for low-income people. Again, I ditto to all the other comments. I support the ban on short stay accommodation of whole houses in residential areas. We did find the information about the Glebe that there's 7 houses have got approval for Airbnb or of short stay accommodation, and I do know 3 of them were purposely built on the Brooker Highway there. I know the owner were purposely built for short stay accommodation. So it hasn't been a wholesale turning of the suburb like Battery Point was in danger of becoming, and I'd say all these particular ones do depend on the circumstances. Only one representation, and knowing the Glebe residents are very, very strong on all sorts of things. They even complain about the noise of the helicopter going to the Royal, and they do complain about noise of festivals on the regatta ground. If there was a deep concern about this particular short stay accommodation, we would have heard a lot of voices.
Further discussion. Councillor Coates.
Look, thank you. Look, I mean, 137 square metre property where the applicants have said they go away for work in 4 to 8 week blocks and they wish to use it as a short-term accommodation while they're away. When they're back, it's noted here that they consider it their principal place of residence. So the fact that they've applied for a permit is good because there'll be a management plan. I think this is a good community outcome in this case. I do note we did receive 1 representation, and I think that's fair. There's a process there. Just through you to the director, so I'm clear in my mind, what limits are there on people putting in representations? Does it need to be neighbours or can it be anyone in the community?
Through you, Lord Mayor, look, it can be anyone that can make a representation.
In the world.
Anyone in the world? I know some of us don't. Through you, Lord Mayor, just to clarify, does that anyone include elected members? Are we able to put in representations?
Well, Well, you are, but it would exclude you from necessarily voting on such an application.
Fair enough. Look, I did note with some of these categories of application, we did receive representations by the Tenants Union of Tasmania. Now, if my understanding is correct, and maybe just for clarity I'll ask the question, can representatives, if they don't agree with the council's decision, independently appeal this to the tribunal? Through you to the director.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
So someone who's put a representation in, if they don't agree with the decision of the planning authority, can they appeal that to the tribunal?
That's correct, within 14 days of notification of the decision.
Look, I think it is telling that the tenants' union themselves have stopped putting in representations, presumably, and I don't know, I can't speak for them, but it would stand to reason that they themselves went out and tried to find a case and evidence to appeal previous applications. I would note that it is very easy for us to, well, it is in our capacity to refuse this application and compel officers to expend council resources and council money and time and effort to try and defend that case. But there was nothing precluding us, or talking to someone else, and having them put in a representation and actually stumping up their own resources and time and effort. But no one is doing it because I genuinely believe the evidence is not there to do so. Look, I commend all those councillors who've been, in my view, applying the thing directly, because we risk council resources, time, money and effort, needlessly putting these things up to tribunal. And ultimately, if we would have viewed that the evidence was there, we could go down the path ourselves. We could put in a representation, we could then take it up a tribunal, we could then fund the resources. We're not. And I think that's telling. Thanks.
Was Councillor Harvey first?
Yeah, look, question, Lord Mayor, just on what Councillor Coates has said. Why can't council officers defend a refusal? Why does it have to go to consultant
Another
planners?
person, yeah, Mr. Noy.
Well, it's my understanding that there's a policy position that council officers aren't required to defend a position that they don't professionally hold. I suspect that that's not a sustainable position. The alternative is not a sustainable position.
Any further discussion?
Yes.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, I just want to make some remarks about some of what Councillor Coates has said. He's been talking about the tenants' union and no near neighbours necessarily putting in, like anybody can put in an application or representation. And in fact, strangely enough, there has been a near neighbour on the same street as this short stay accommodation who has actually lodged a representation. I would expect that there would be more representations lodged by neighbours who, as I told you about that Liverpool Crescent person who's got short stay accommodation all around her, looking right into her living room every day, every week, twice a week there's new people looking into her living room. I think people get worn down by this argument. They just don't see that council can respond as well or are responding and representing their needs. So this representation this representor is concerned about this 3-bedroom weatherboard house and is concerned about the off-street that there's no off-street parking, and concerned about the neighbourhood and the impact of short stay accommodation in the glebe on this kind of on the neighbourhood of Glebe. And I have had many conversations with Glebe residents who are frustrated by short stay accommodation just bobbing up in their neighbourhood. It would be, I think Mr. Noy gave us some figures at committee the other day, suggesting there was only like 3% or something of houses in the glebe which are short stay accommodation. I find that a baffling statistic, if that was the right, if I'm quoting that correctly. and it would be fascinating to do an audit or to hear actually how many, maybe there's a whole lot of illegal visitor accommodation occurring in the Glebe, I don't know, but we have a representative who is concerned about the impact on residences, on residential amenity. Again, I will recommend or foreshadow a refusal motion based on residential amenity.
Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Just with regards to what you were saying earlier, the Lord Mayor noted there was two various different issues with PD6 and the criteria that over the 200 square metres. And I think you also noted that the state government had outlined that visitor accommodation shouldn't be approved if it's within the strata title or scheme. Just a question: is this particular application or this permit that we're seeking, is it within the strata scheme?
No.
Oh, okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Mr. No, it's...
It is. Yeah, that is my understanding.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to know because 1.2 says that it is within a 3-lot residential strata scheme, so I just wanted that clarified. Is it? Okay. Great, thank you very much for clarifying that. I'm just a little bit, I find it a little bit interesting that the horn is constantly tooted about us not following rules. We've got to stay within a certain scheme. We can't do this, we can't do that because we've got to follow certain rules. But this is actually going against PD6 that the state government has specifically outlined. So yeah, I'm kind of a little bit confused. If it is within the strata scheme and PD6 says that we shouldn't be approving that, to me this would be one of the reasons why I'd be refusing this. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to again follow the rules, and under the provisions of the rules, my refusal of this is based on clause 3.1A2. This is a strata scheme and is used for residential use. And therefore, under the acceptable solution, it has been refused. And therefore, under the rules of the scheme, I refuse it. Point number 2, clause 3.1P2 states it must not cause an unreasonable loss for residential amenity. Now, it is interesting to note that the officers have stated this, that there is some increased potential for amenity impact if guests are inappropriately use this particular door space. So there is an acknowledgement that there is a potential for the impact as far as the amenity is concerned. And then furthermore, there is another statement which states that the existing level of privacy between these two dwellings in the area is relatively low. Now again, I'm basing this on, firstly, the rule 3.1A2, the recommendation by the councillors, the staff themselves, it does not satisfy. And then because it doesn't satisfy, we go to the performance criteria. The performance criteria 3.1P2 states that, and it is my view that there are concerns for me if these statements are made. And point number 3, using the rule E661P, which is parking. Parking is not really, there is a requirement for one that has great difficulty as far as parking is concerned. So my decision is based on these rules. It's nothing to do with housing or anything else, but basing it on that and using my discernment. Thank you.
Alderman Thomas.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm exhausted. Look, I went to, the difficulty here is, and we are sympathetic to the problem. The issue is a drafting issue because it actually requires the person reviewing the application to positively and reasonably decide that there will be an unreasonable loss of residential amenities. It's not a may, it's not a discretion, it's not a might. I think all of these, I agree with Councillor Dutta, might. I think we would have probably ended up refusing most of them, but the word is must. And when you look at must, the precursor to that, the qualification to anyone looking at this, and our planners and the tribunal, etc., are required to apply the law acting at all times reasonably on reasonable grounds. Now, unless you can come forward, I guess maybe the only one might work through you, Lord Mayor, to Councillor Dutta, would be if the next door unit, which is owned by the same person, was already operating short term and was creating mayhem, because quite often I think you've used in this chamber the fact that visitors, including myself, when we use short-term accommodation, aren't as respectful necessarily as permanent residents. But the word must not cause is the condition here that must be found in every case that's being applied for. It's not may. The law is an ASS for this particular issue, because the Parliamentary Council, when they looked at this, is the government must have intended, because it's such a clear statement, this PD6, the government must have intended that this was a hurdle that had to be got through. I shouldn't use hurdle. That would not get through, that would have to be applied. So it's not may cause, it's must not cause. And that's why, with sympathy, it's my law school said must is an appropriate test that an officer acting reasonably, assessing the application, must apply.
I'd just ask a question on that, following on from Alderman Thomas. Surely we require of the applicant that they demonstrate how they must not cause loss of residential amenity. Do we require applications to demonstrate proof of these 6 or 7 performance criteria?
Lord Mayor, I think the officers have undertaken that assessment themselves in this instance, and I refer you to section 6.7.5 of the officers' report. And while they do acknowledge the close proximity of these dwellings to each other, and hence a potential loss of residential amenity, the view of the officers are that that amenity, whether it's a residence or whether it's a short-term visitor accommodation, would not change the loss of amenity for the adjacent property owner. So that's the conclusion of the officers in this case.
Mr. Knight, I guess I was asking more generally, why wouldn't we ask applicants who are going against the acceptable solution to produce tangible evidence how they must not cause unreasonable loss of this, these 5 or 6 criteria? Because if it was another sort of application, like a building or a new dwelling, there'd be a requirement for them to produce material that they will comply with the performance criteria, isn't there?
Not in all instances, Lord Mayor. Visual bulk, those sorts of things. Overshadowing, yes, for example. They will be required to provide shadow diagrams, for example, but not in every instance do they have to provide evidence.
Got a question.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I have spoken, so I'm not speaking again. I'm just asking a question. Are you aware, Director, through you, Chair, of the circumstances of the applicant?
Yeah, through you, Lord Mayor, yes, it's documented within the officer's report.
And that being 2 doctors whose employment will finish and they will be going on locums for 4 or 5 weeks?
Yes, I'm aware of that, Lord
And
Mayor.
they do plan eventually to return to Hobart?
Briscoe,
I'm allowed to ask questions.
No, sorry.
I'm not allowed to ask questions.
You are.
Thank you.
Conditions on and drawing the officers into debate. The
No,
CEO
it's not-
has
no,
advised me. No, and there are some constraints on questions. And
I know you have a problem with transparency, but I think it's relevant.
Point of order. Point of order. That should be withdrawn. I think that's offensive.
Yeah.
Misleading.
If you you'd like me to read you the question, the rules around questions, Alderman Briscoe, I'm happy to. But
I'm aware of it.
But well, yeah, there are restrictions on the kind of questioning you can undertake of an officer, and it isn't. An officer doesn't have to answer all of the questions, and when you're, I guess, leading, your questions are leading for the purposes of debate. That isn't really what the point of the questions are. So.
Thank you. I'll take that note next council meeting. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on this item? There being none, we'll put the motion for approval. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Aye. Show of hands. All those in favour.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Coates, Alderman Baracus, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
And against?
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. That's lost, Lord Mayor. 5 votes all.
Foreshadowed motion, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by, who wants to, Councillor Sherlock. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Carried oh, sorry.
Please.
All those in favour.
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Coates, Alderman Baracus, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe. That's lost, Lord Mayor. 5 votes all.
Okay. So we now move to the closed. Oh, sorry, we've got to go back to item 6, which is a petition.
Oh, yes.
I'd like the CEO to read that out for us.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and please accept my apologies that we've had to hold this item over till the end of the meeting. This petition has been submitted by Emma Green of 16 Saunders Street. The matter for which the petition has been lodged relates to the proposal for the Hobart City Council to build a new playground across 2 council-owned blocks of the land on Saunders Crescent and Marie Close in South Hobart. The action being sought by the petitioner is to fund the development of a playground for the site in close consultation with local residents, and also to fund the construction, Lord Mayor, of the playground. The total number of signatories received to the petition are 53. Thank you,
Lord Mayor, I move that this item be sent to the appropriate committee for consideration, which will be the Parks Committee, I imagine.
And seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Yeah. Thanks.
All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. I need a motion to move into the closed. Alderman Baracus, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor.
No, it's good.
All those in favour of moving into the closed say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously.